Hello everyone, I'm Chloe Johnson and welcome to this Fresh Business Thinking webinar series, Lockdown Learning for Businesses, supported by BT. Fresh Business Thinking are proud to be a part of Skills for Tomorrow from BT, which is helping 10 million people in the UK make the most of life in the digital world. Working with us and other leading digital skills, enterprise and community organisations, BT has created and collated some of the best advice, information and support in one easy place to navigate. With everything in one place, it's easy for anyone to access our webinars as well as discover other ways they or their family and friends can grow their confidence and skills to make the most of tech. All it takes to get started is head to www.bt.com/skills for tomorrow, or you can click on the link in the comments. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for tuning in. We have some very special guests today covering the legal and business landscape during and post COVID-19. Our partner Starling Bank is joining us today to kickstart a new series with their amazing marketplace providers to cover all the latest updates on their business banking. Starling is represented today by Guy Waller, their partnerships manager, who will be chatting with Helen Turnbull and Frankie Mundy from Sparqa Legal. Sparqa Legal sits on Starling's innovative in-app marketplace and offers the legal tools and resources needed to help businesses navigate the legal landscape. I'll pass over to you, Guy.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining and thanks to Helen and Frankie for Sparqa Legal. To kick off, I'd like to start by introducing the series. For those that don't know, Starling is an award-winning UK digital bank offering personal and business accounts. Our approach to business banking is to give our customers world-class features that save them time and money while they run the show, and to provide as much value as we can to their everyday business needs. No place better exemplifies this than the marketplace, where you can connect your Starling business account with a host of great third-party products and services to help with everything from accounting to business insurance and legal tools, all of your business admin under one roof. So we've teamed up with the GBEA to spotlight a few of those great service providers and help keep you up to date on all of the new features Starling's business account offers. SparkIllegal joined the marketplace in December 2019 to help bring their suite of legal tools and services to our business customers. So to kick it off, we heard a little bit from Chloe about SparkIllegal, but it'd be great to find out a bit more about the business. And in addition to that, it'd be great, Sparqa, if you could explain why business owners need practical legal tools that don't cost the earth.
Thanks, Guy. Sparqa Legal was really born from the desire to give SMEs, so small to medium enterprises, some practical legal help throughout their business life cycle without needing to resort to really expensive one-to-one legal services in the traditional way. About 99% of all the businesses in this country are SMEs, and quite extraordinarily, they're not really served by those traditional legal services. They can be quite expensive and slow, and it's not at all suitable for those day-to-day small problems that you just need to deal with on the spot. So in reality, SME owners need to engage with legal matters all of the time. And we're talking about the tiny everyday practicalities. So maybe something like how you phrase the cookie notice on your website, what you say to a customer complaint, what you do if someone's late paying an invoice, how you deal with an employee who's off sick a lot. There's law in all of it. And what we've done at Sparqa Legal is we've identified thousands of points like this that occur all across the lifetime of a business, as well as those much bigger, more recognizable things like getting your terms and conditions sorted out. And our mission really comes from the fact that it is so important to get these little everyday things right. Now, much more than ever, when so many businesses are operating on a knife edge and people just aren't in a position to be making any expensive mistakes. And getting it wrong really can break a business. So of those things that I've mentioned already, getting mixed up about, say, consumer rights, that can leave you with bad reviews online, which, as anyone knows, is pretty easy to get if you're not careful. Or maybe more seriously, complaints against your business to trading standards, something like that. If you've got a lax system for chasing up your invoices, that can very quickly get you into cash flow problems, which is the #1 killer of startups. But there are loads of DIY legal things you can do to help yourself with this. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking to help our customers with. So what we've done to address this is create an online service that has 4 main strands to try and cover everything we think that you'll need. So first of all, the most obvious one perhaps, documentation and templates. We have a really wide range of customer-made documents that you can just download straight off and use immediately, and also a large number of customizable ones where you can generate a bespoke document for your business needs by filling in a questionnaire, tailoring it to exactly what you need. All of them written by our team of experienced lawyers. And they cover the whole life cycle for an SME, all the way from setting up, so say maybe the paperwork you need to set up your website, like a privacy policy or a cookie notice, terms and conditions of business. Then if you're a bit more established, things that you need to grow your business. So maybe you need documentation for new investment, like a shareholders agreement or something like that, or for taking on employees if you're ready to start hiring staff, all the way through to selling up if you want to move on from your business and sell it to someone. So we've got things like a sale non-disclosure agreement to help you keep things confidential at what is likely to be quite a sensitive time for your business. So we cater for all of these different needs and to all sizes of SME, from the one person sort of sole trader type arrangement right through to much more established companies with maybe a number of directors and shareholders involved. So that's the first, and as I say, possibly the most obvious part of the product. But we've taken it much further than that. So we've also got thousands of know-how questions. And these are Q&A that cover all of those day-to-day practicalities that I was talking about, those little bits and pieces, which of course you would never in a million years go to a lawyer for, but about which maybe you want some reassurance that what you're doing is the right thing. So we can help with that. And that's everything from, say, how to choose a company name in the first place, through to maybe what you can do if one of your employees refuses to come back to work because they're worried about coronavirus. All practical points and all searchable. The third thing we've done is toolkits. So we've bundled up our content for people with a specific task at hand into these toolkits, topped it off with a step-by-step guide that leads you through exactly what you need to do to achieve whatever the toolkit's about. For example, earlier this year, and one of the most popular things that we have created is a furlough toolkit. So we put together all of the letters and documents you need to set someone up on furlough leave, lots of guidance about how to go about it and all of the questions that arise during the process, which has been a really helpful feature and a great way into the content if you're doing something particular. And finally, fourthly, we've got a current awareness arrangement to basically give you the confidence that you are keeping up to date. And Frankie can tell you a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Helen. Yes, so rather than just getting legal advice at a specific point in time, by using Sparqa's service, as Helen just said, businesses can also be confident that they're staying up to date with the law. In our team, we monitor legal developments on a daily basis. So as and when developments occur, they feed straight back through to the content and to the documents. So this means that when businesses check back, they can be confident that they're receiving the most up-to-date information at that time. We also flag really important updates to our users through things like legal newsflash emails. We publish blogs on our site. We feature updates in newsletters, and we also feature them on our social media networks.
Thanks very much for your answers, guys. So another thing which I think our business customers and businesses more generally would be keen to understand is how COVID has affected the legal and business landscape for business owners.
Sure. Well, the short answer to that, Guy, is fairly obviously it has been dramatically affected. There have been some absolutely huge legal and policy changes that have been introduced with unprecedented speed in response to an unprecedented situation. We've identified 3 broad phases so far, each of which has brought its own particular challenges for business. So the first phase, which frankly feels like a really long time ago now, was that kind of initial panic that everyone felt. Lots of sudden changes, businesses scrambling to deal with immediate threats. We certainly saw a lot of people struggling with questions about 3 things in particular. Insurance coverage was a big one, whether there was anything in people's existing insurance policies that might cover a pandemic, which of course literally no one had ever thought about before. The second one, which was quite pervasive, was dealing with contracts. So this affected a lot of businesses in very different ways, but it was things like what to do when your contracts suddenly become either impossible to carry out or unnecessary in your circumstances. And that covered everything from, say, a cleaning contract for an office. If you're no longer using your office, what do you do about that? All the way through to maybe more obvious ones like supplier deals, if your sales have disappeared overnight, or if you're sourcing things from abroad and a border has suddenly closed, what to do then. And thirdly, within that kind of first panic, was dealing with employees. People are often a business's greatest and certainly most expensive asset. There were a lot of immediate staffing concerns when lockdown started, and certainly before that furlough scheme was first announced, there were a lot of businesses going for hasty redundancies that they've since had to row back on, or asking for volunteers to take unpaid leave, things like that. But a real kind of difficult first phase, I think, for most people with all the uncertainty. The second phase, much more practical for a lot of people. It became clear that some government help was going to be forthcoming, but that this wasn't going to be just a few weeks worth of unusual circumstances that everyone could just grit their teeth and get through somehow. Much bigger, more permanent changes were afoot at this point in the pandemic, and some of these we're seeing are still going on now. So the kind of changes we're looking at there, a lot of issues with business premises, and you may find that these are still issues for you now. So businesses starting to look for rent holidays or rent breaks of some sort from their landlords, particularly as the quarter days started to come up and rent payments that were due in advance started falling. That's been particularly difficult. People started changing their business model, and for anyone who hasn't done anything along these lines, it maybe is something to think about if you're still struggling. There's been a general trend, for fairly obvious reasons, towards moving businesses online wherever possible, or even for changing the services you provide in order to do that, or to reduce or eliminate contact during your provision. Anything to sort of try and keep things ticking over without having face-to-face contact with customers, essentially. And then to go with these sort of practical concerns for businesses, there have been some big legal changes as well during that kind of central phase. The furlough scheme, as we've mentioned, is certainly the most well-known, and is absolutely enormous in terms of both scope and reach. There have been significant changes elsewhere as well, though, which have gone maybe a bit more under the radar for a lot of people. So, for example, there have been legal protections introduced to stop struggling businesses from going under by effectively preventing companies from being wound up until at least the end of September, even if they're insolvent. So the idea behind this one is to give companies a chance to start trading out of any COVID-induced difficulties, and not having the rug pulled out from underneath them during a time when inevitably lots of businesses are, on their balance sheet at least, going to be close to insolvency. And to go hand in hand with that, there have also been some legal changes that are designed to help company directors maybe take some more risks when they're trying to get their businesses out of difficulty. So in normal times, there are laws that are designed to punish company directors if they keep, for example, running up debts and so on when they know that their company is about to fold or is in serious trouble. Those laws have been suspended to enable directors to take bolder measures to try and save their company without having to worry about being personally liable if they don't succeed. So some pretty big changes to how everything works there. For that sort of central and practical fallout. And as I say, many of those people are still dealing with now. And the final part of it all, the kind of gradual exit from lockdown, and I think we all hope a staged return to something like business as usual. This is where we are now. Maybe some of the news over the weekend wasn't that great in terms of how quickly we're going to be able to get out of lockdown, but so it looks like there might be some bumps in the road as we go. But this has again brought out a whole new set of issues for business owners. And there are some really key ones that we've picked out for people to start thinking about now. Health and safety, that's obviously absolutely paramount at the moment in a way that maybe most businesses haven't thought about it enough in the past, should be front and centre these days. So careful compliance with the government's really extensive COVID secure guidance is a big issue and very important to get right. So think about that if you haven't been. Profitability issues are going to be key for lots of people. Loads of businesses getting back up and running who are going to be running at a reduced capacity or maybe at a lower footfall for the foreseeable future. And being flexible and adjusting your business model to make your margins work, absolutely crucial here. The solutions obviously are going to differ depending on what type of business you have, but the kind of things that people have been looking at that we've found are branching out into new areas of business that can better weather the threat, supplementing income with online sales that we've mentioned already, and of course cost cutting and efficiency savings absolutely everywhere you can. Flexibility really the key to making a go of it here, I think. And finally, one of the last things going forwards as we come out of lockdown, reducing premises requirements. So this is quite a likely shift for a lot of businesses, whether because your business is itself just smaller these days, or whether maybe working from home went particularly well. Perhaps your staff are keen to ditch their commute for as long as they can, or at least work part-time in the office and part-time at home. There are various solutions that you might look at here, whether it's just waiting for your tenancy to run out and moving out of your premises, very simply, or whether you're keen to be a bit more proactive about it and say, either use a break clause if you have one in your tenancy to get out early, or perhaps subletting some or all of your business premises to someone else if you can. We're certainly expecting to see quite a lot of big changes along these lines in the months to come. And looking forward to the future, even more big changes on the cards, and certainly ones that we'll be looking to keep everyone informed of as time goes on. A big case was heard last week involving all of the major insurers to decide whether many of their business insurance policies actually will cover COVID-19 losses or not. So that is potentially worth billions and is very much one to watch out for. The judgment will be carefully considered, so it's not due to come out until September, but as I say, we will certainly be keeping a close eye on that and be letting our customers know when it's decided and what they can do about it. And then the next really big change on the horizon for everyone to think about is probably going to be the impending end of the furlough scheme in October. So that's undoubtedly going to have a massive impact across all sectors, as loads of businesses are effectively going to finally have to face up to difficult decisions about what their workforce needs actually are.
Thanks very much for all the detail, Helen. So I guess in that vein, how are job retention schemes winding down, and what should business owners expect next? What's to come?
Yeah, so I mean, as Helen mentioned, the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, or the Furlough Scheme as we commonly refer to it, has been a complete lifeline for many businesses throughout the pandemic. It was first introduced back in March when it quickly became apparent just how much disruptions businesses were likely to face as a result of the pandemic. And its purpose has essentially been to save jobs, and it allows employers to keep staff who might otherwise have been made redundant. So as of this month, it's now beginning to wind down, and it will officially close on the 31st of October, at which point the government's assistance will finally come to an end. In terms of what business owners should expect next, if they've been relying on the scheme up until now, they'll need to start considering what the end of the scheme actually means for them and whether or not they will be able to keep all of their staff on.
Thank you very much. And how has, obviously we've had a number of months of it, how has the furlough scheme worked thus far for business?
Yeah, so I'll give a brief overview. I'm sure many people are familiar. So it's worked by allowing employers to agree with their staff that they'll be placed on furlough leave, during which time they cannot do any work at all for the business, but it allows the business to claim a grant from the government for a portion of their wages. So employers have been able to claim 80% of their furloughed workers' normal wages, including the associated national insurance and pension contributions, up to a cap of £2,500 per month. Now, employers haven't needed to top up their staff members' pay, but some have, of course, chosen to. Initially, staff had to be placed on furlough leave for a minimum period of 3 weeks. So whilst they could be rotated on and off, each period had to last at least 3 weeks. Now, things changed a little bit on the 1st of July when flexible furloughing was introduced. Essentially, flexible furlough means that provided a staff member had been furloughed for the minimum 3-week period already, employers can now agree with them that they'll be flexibly furloughed instead. What this means is that they can be brought back to work on a part-time basis whilst allowing their employer to continue to claim under the scheme for any days that they're furloughed. And any hours that staff do work must be paid at their normal wages. Employers can agree to bring back staff on whatever hours and shift patterns they want. So that could be week on, week off. It could be something like furloughed for 2 days a week and working for 3, or it could even still be full-time furlough if they can't afford to bring their staff back yet at all. There's one slight catch to flexible furlough. There's a limit to the number of staff that can be furloughed at any one time. So employers can't furlough more people than the maximum they previously claimed for in any one claim period before flexible furloughing was introduced, so before the 30th of June. So if, for example, they had 10 members of staff who they were previously rotating on and off furlough, so 5 staff on furlough for 3 weeks, 5 staff working, and then they swapped it around. From the 1st of July, they can only claim for 5 staff on furlough in any one claim period. There are a few exceptions to this, for example, for staff who've returned from family leave after the 10th of June. But I think essentially flexible furlough is designed to help businesses to start getting back on their feet by giving them the flexibility to bring their staff back into the workplace to the extent that they can afford to do so as we start to move towards the end of the scheme.
Okay, and Frankie, what's important for employers to know as the scheme does wind down, as you say, in October?
Yeah, so it actually started winding down on Saturday, which was the 1st of August. So employers now have to start contributing towards the grant. So for August, the government will continue to pay the 80% up to the £2,500 cap, but employers will have to pay the applicable national insurance and pension contributions. In September, the government will reduce its grant to 70% of wages, up to a cap of £2,187.50 per month, and employers will be expected to cover both the national insurance and pension contributions and to top up pay for furloughed hours to ensure that staff still receive at least 80% of their normal wage. So the staff members' pay shouldn't be affected at all. And then for the final month of the scheme in October, the government will again reduce its grant to 60% this time, up to a cap of £1,875 per month. And employers will have to pay both the national insurance and pension contributions and the additional 20% to ensure, again, that the staff member's pay doesn't slip below the 80%. And then the scheme will finally draw to a close on the 31st of October, ahead of which, as we've said, employers will need to decide what their next move is. And with that in mind, and as an incentive to try to encourage employers to bring back furloughed staff rather than making them redundant, the government announced last month that they were introducing a job retention bonus. So essentially, this will be a one-off payment of £1,000 in February for each furloughed worker that an employer consistently employs through to the 31st of January 2021. This is provided that that staff member earned at least £520 per month on average between the 1st of November and the 31st of January. I think whether or not this is in fact enough of an incentive for employers will very much depend on their individual circumstances. This means that now is certainly a really good time for employers to start thinking about long-term workforce planning. And this will include potentially making some difficult decisions about whether they can in fact afford to keep all of their staff or whether they might need to let some go.
Okay, so what do business owners need to be thinking about now if they think that redundancies might be coming and might be needed?
Yeah, so if employers think that redundancies might be on the cards once the scheme winds down, now is a really good time to start thinking about what steps they will need to take and whether they need to start that process now. This will be particularly important for employers who plan on making 20 or more employees redundant within a 90-day period, as they'll need to comply with collective consultation rules. This means that employers will need to begin collective consultation at least 30 days before they make that first dismissal, and that increases to 45 days if they'll be making 100 or more employees redundant. There is absolutely nothing to stop employers making staff redundant whilst they're on furlough, but they will need to consider whether it's reasonable to do so and make sure they properly document their business decisions. Redundancy notice pay can be claimed under the scheme while it's still running, but any statutory or contractual redundancy payments can't be claimed for under the scheme. I think with redundancies, I just really can't stress enough how important it is that employers follow a proper and a fair process. This will be particularly important if employees who've been continuously employed for more than 2 years are being made redundant, as those employees could bring unfair dismissal claims if they don't feel a fair process was followed. But having said that, any employee could bring a discrimination claim if they feel they've been unfairly treated, and so it's best practice to follow a fair process regardless of a staff member's length of service. I think it's also really important to bear in mind the damage that not following a fair process could cause to a business's reputation and also to the morale of the remaining workforce. A fair process means several things. It means consulting with staff, it means considering alternatives to redundancies, it means creating an appropriate selection pool and scoring matrix for your redundancies, and perhaps even also asking for volunteers. Equally, I should mention that if businesses have a contractual redundancy policy in place, they should really make sure that they follow that. If businesses are struggling in this area and are concerned about the risks if they get redundancies wrong, Sparqa does have loads of template documents and a redundancy toolkit that can help to guide them through the process every step of the way. And I just want to flag at this point that redundancy should always be viewed as a last resort. So whilst it's prudent for businesses to start thinking about what that process and timeline might look like for them if they need to go down that route, it's also really important for us to consider what alternatives they might have.
So on that basis, what are the alternatives to redundancies that employers could consider?
Yeah, so there are various different alternatives to redundancies, and I'll take you through a couple of the key ones now, and we'll flag some of the legal pitfalls that businesses should look out for. So I'll first look at whether you can move staff around to different roles within your organisation, and also how you can renegotiate their contracts. For example, if you're thinking you might ask staff to take a pay cut or to reduce their hours to enable you to keep on more of your workforce. And whether or not any of these alternatives will be appropriate will completely depend on the business in question and also the staff members in question. But I think it's really important that a business demonstrates that it has at least considered alternatives before heading down the redundancy path. So in terms of moving staff around within the business, a business might find that although it's got reduced capacity in one area, it's got an uptake in another. And in that case, it might be able to offer to move staff to different roles within the business to avoid making them redundant. The way to do this would be to make the staff members' role redundant and then offer them an alternative position during their notice period. So whilst this is still technically a redundancy situation, if the new role is a reasonable alternative and the staff member doesn't accept, then employers won't have the same obligations to make redundancy payments if that staff member was eligible for one. So in terms of the second option we'll discuss, that was renegotiating contracts. So you might want staff to take a pay cut, either temporarily or permanently, or you might want to reduce their hours, for example, moving staff to part-time hours or job sharing for the long or short term. I think the main thing I just want to flag with this option before we get into it is that you won't need to worry about any of the technical legal stuff if you can simply sit down and try and agree any variations with your employees. It'll be important that employers approach these conversations sensitively, particularly if you are looking to reduce things like pay or benefits. It's really important to be aware of the impact these kind of changes could have on the employment relationship. I think also naturally staff are less likely to jump to agree to a change that's detrimental to them. But if a business consults with them to explain the reasons, listens to staff members' concerns, that staff member might be willing to agree if they know that the only realistic alternative is redundancy. So employers should make sure they leave plenty of lead-in time, listen to concerns from staff and objections, and if they do agree, make sure they record their consent in writing and give them a written copy of the new employment terms as soon as possible and within 1 month. So if staff members won't agree to the changes to their contract, there's a few different options employers could try if they still want to go ahead with the contract variations. So these are firstly, checking if the contract allows you to make the change. Secondly, imposing the change unilaterally. And finally, terminating the staff member's contract and rehiring them on new terms. I'll talk about these all in turn. They all come with their own inherent risks, which businesses will need to assess and balance with the potential benefits of forcing the changes through. So firstly, it's a good idea to check the employment contract to see if it contains a clause allowing you to make the change you want to make. So for example, if you want your staff member to relocate to a different office because you've got an uptake there and there's a different role they can take there, you might have what's called a mobility clause in the contract, which allows you to do this. Otherwise, you're looking for a clause known as a flexibility or variation clause, which allows you to make more general changes to their employment terms. So for example, to their working hours. But even if the contract does have one of these clauses, it's still a really good idea to consult with staff and try and get their agreement, as there are certain limitations on how they can be used, and it's really important that employers act reasonably at all times. If there's no clause in the contract, an employer could try to impose the change unilaterally. Again, this is risky, even if a business has an urgent reason for doing so, as you could face claims for a breach of contract or even unfair or constructive dismissal if an employee resigns because the change has been forced through. There's also a risk of unlawful deduction of wages claims if you reduce staff pay without their consent. So the final option, if staff members won't agree to changes, is to terminate their contract and re-engage them on new terms. There are naturally risks that are going to come with this option, and it really should only be done as a last resort. You essentially need to dismiss your employee, so it'll be really important to follow a fair dismissal process to avoid claims for unfair dismissal or breach of contract. and then follow a proper recruitment process to rehire them. Equally, I should flag with this option that if the changes in the new contracts are significant, this might actually count as a redundancy situation. So employers will need to be alive to this possibility to make sure they follow a proper process, including consultation. So I think with this, the key takeaway is, if you think you'll need to or want to amend your employees' contracts, engage with them as early as you can to explain what your business reasons are and what the alternative is, ultimately with a view to trying to get their consent. This will avoid all of the sticky legal issues, and from a relationship perspective will help to preserve trust and morale amongst your workforce as you navigate this period.
Thanks, Frankie. So you covered quite a lot there, but in terms of other things, what else will employers need to consider as the job retention scheme winds down and as they start to return to the workplace?
Yeah, so there's various different legal considerations for employers. We'll just flag a few now. So if they're bringing back staff from furlough leave as their workplace reopens, things to think about will include how to make sure they reopen safely, and also there'll be associated HR issues undoubtedly. So businesses have health and safety obligations towards their staff. So for example, they must make sure that their premises are COVID secure when they reopen. Regardless of what safety measures they do put in place, it will be really important to bear in mind that staff may still be wary about coming back to the workplace, regardless of whether they've been on furlough leave or if they've just been working from home for a while. For example, some staff might have ongoing childcare or caring responsibilities, which will make it difficult for them to come back in. Or they might be in clinically vulnerable groups and be concerned about whether they'll be able to comply with social distancing rules at work. The best thing for an employer to do here is to consult with staff about the safety measures they've put in place, and to also try to address any individual concerns that staff have. For example, if an employee is worried about the commutes, an employer could think about whether more could be done to help them avoid travelling on public transport at peak times. So this could be things like providing extra car parking spaces or bike racks, or even staggering start and finish times. Equally, if an employee has ongoing childcare issues, an employer could consider whether a flexible working arrangement would work, or even whether that staff member is eligible for unpaid parental or carers leave. Ultimately, an employer can, of course, resort to disciplinary action if a staff member simply refuses to come back in and they're unable to reach a compromise with them. But I think it's important to tread quite carefully here. Employees who reasonably believe they've been placed in serious and imminent danger if they return might be able to claim unfair dismissal if they're let go because they refuse to come in.
Okay, and looking forward in terms of the legacy of the pandemic and its impact on the workforce, what are your sort of key takeaways? What do you think business owners can expect?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. And I think we're certainly likely to see changes to the working model in the longer term. In particular, I think employers should definitely be prepared to deal with flexible working requests from staff when they start to return to the workplace. As I mentioned earlier, this might be because staff are wary of coming back, they might have ongoing responsibilities at home, or it might simply be that they've got accustomed to and enjoyed working from home during the pandemic and want to continue to do so in the longer run. In terms of flexible working requests, if they're made, I think regardless of a business as usual policy, it's a good idea to listen to staff members' individual circumstances and try to reach an agreement with them. It's important to bear in mind that employees with at least 26 weeks continuous service are legally entitled to make a formal request for flexible working. So whilst employers don't actually need to agree to these requests, they have certain responsibilities to act reasonably when dealing with them, and they can only reject them on one of 8 specific grounds. So this includes things like it would cause an unacceptable cost to their business, or they'd be unable to reorganise work effectively amongst the rest of their staff. So regardless, I think establishing a clear policy on flexible working is a really good idea, and this will help to ensure that requests are dealt with consistently and transparently, which again will help to avoid claims of discrimination from staff. But I think regardless of whether staff actually make the flexible working requests, businesses might actually themselves already be planning a prolonged period of remote working, and we may see this becoming the norm. We've already seen high-profile players like Twitter announce that their staff will be allowed to work from home forever. And I think, of course, it won't be right for all workforces, but many employers may have experienced some benefits of home working during lockdown. Could be things like increased morale, increased productivity, and of course, importantly, rent savings. And as Helen mentioned earlier, this is naturally going to have a knock-on effect on the type of commercial premises that will be appropriate for businesses. They might be looking to downsize, or they might be simply looking to hire rooms within shared office space, and ultimately perhaps moving more and more of their business online.
So why do you think it's so critical to have these types of services now? Because Sparqa, forgive me if I'm wrong, are very much the first of its kind in this space, offering these kind of resources.
So it's a really tough time for businesses at the moment. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat it. Lots of people are really struggling. And I think this means it's particularly important to pay attention to getting your legals right and getting them right now, and for two reasons. First of all, as we've gone into in a bit of detail so far this afternoon, there have been a raft of new laws and new regulations that businesses really have to engage with quickly and to get right quickly. So things like the COVID secure health and safety measures, absolutely vital to reassure your customers and your staff alike that you have their interests at heart, that they will be safe, and that they can do business with you or work for you with confidence. So that's incredibly important. And secondly, these are really extraordinary times, which do mean that a lot of businesses, business owners are having to do new things that they've never had to think about before in more usual times, and maybe they need help to get them right. So we've heard in quite a lot of depth from Frankie about the various different processes that maybe someone who has employees is having to go through. Pretty much all of those are probably going to be new to pretty much all businesses. So with the best will in the world, we're expecting to see a lot of people having to make a lot of difficult decisions, especially about things like redundancies. Most businesses have never had to think about those before, and it is absolutely vital that things like that are done right and are done fairly. It can really cause problems for your business down the line if there are any issues with your process or your paperwork on those kinds of things. So very, very key to get it right. And because a service like Sparqa Legal, we can give you not just all of the documents that you need in a super straightforward format where you can just fill out a questionnaire and generate everything. But we also couple that with really detailed guidance. So we lead you step by step through all those processes, so you know that what you're doing is fair, and you know that the decisions you're making are right, and you can be confident about that, even if it's something you've never done before. And I think that's a real benefit to businesses at a time when, frankly, most people want to be focusing on the positive things to try and build up their business and to try and get things going again. And having that sort of support in your back pocket, I think is absolutely key to recovery for everyone.
Thanks, Helen. I completely agree. And disrupting the traditional banking sector is one of the reasons Starling came to be. We believe there are better ways to do things, and customers deserve more at fair prices. We recently launched our Business Toolkit to provide banking customers, especially sole traders, with genuinely helpful tools and features to make bookkeeping simple and straightforward, whether that's for invoices or taxes. We're all about making business owners' lives easier, who may not be experts in legal requirements or bookkeeping, but having to engage with this every day. I guess to draw the discussion to a close, it's been really good, but we're now going to jump into some quick Q&As. We've had a number of people send in their questions, which we're going to try and get through now. But if you have any questions or if anything's brought up in the session, please just email GBEA and we'll get back to you. The first question, Helen and Frankie, is we've had a question on redundancy and the move to entrepreneurship. As more people take the plunge to starting their own business, what should they bear in mind from a legal standpoint?
Yes, there have been lots of predictions that emerging from lockdown could see a real surge in small new startups as people try something new, or perhaps people have been made redundant and have a redundancy payment in their back pocket, that kind of thing. There is plenty to think about here. It obviously depends on what type of business you're starting up, but we think there are probably 3 absolutely key things to get you started. So firstly, start with a clear vision and get a written business plan. And don't just write it up and then put it in a drawer after you've shown it to your investors or taken it to the bank to get yourself started. A business plan is a live document and it really is there to help you. It's not just a piece of paperwork to secure some funding and forget. So do keep going back to it for guidance as you go. Do revise it as you learn and as you grow. I'm not sure I'm aware of any business that's created a business plan, stuck religiously to it and hasn't changed a thing. You're bound to come up with new ideas. So really use it as a basis to kick off, but treat it as a living document. Secondly, I would say think really hard about whether or not to set up a company. Even if it's just going to be you and you're not planning on employing anyone or anything like that, do think about it. It is very easy to do. It need not be expensive at all. You can do it yourself if you want to. We've obviously got guidance to help you do that. And it has lots of benefits for you, ranging from not just making you look more professional to people you deal with, but absolutely crucially to protecting your personal assets, your home in particular, from any financial fallout if things don't go to plan. So really worthwhile thinking about that one and doing it if you think it's the right decision for you. And thirdly, I would say get all your paperwork in order right from the start. So by paperwork, I mean things like get good terms and conditions or contracts in place that you'll use to actually do business, whatever your business may be. Get proper invoices going. There are plenty of things in the Starling Toolkit that can help you as well. Properly done, all these things will help reassure your customers and really protect your business again if things go wrong. It is very, very worthwhile having everything straightened out right from the start. So I would really, really recommend that.
Thanks very much, Helen. The next question we had was around what business owners need to consider if they need to downsize or change their business premises in the coming months.
Sure. I mean, again, there are likely to be lots of businesses in this boat. That's something we've touched on a couple of times this afternoon. And in the coming weeks and months, we're expecting to see quite a lot of changes in the business tenancy market. So I would say have a think about your needs and have a think about your budget before you make any maybe short-termish decisions. If you think that downsizing or moving is the answer for you, and like most businesses, you rent your premises, there are 4 things overall that you can consider trying. First, before you do anything drastic, consider talking to your landlord, especially if cash flow or budget is part of the issue for you, as I expect there will be for lots. Your landlord may well be open to negotiating a reduced rent, especially if you're not using the full extent of the premises, and particularly if they're easily partitioned in some way. Times are very uncertain for your landlord as well as they are for you, and you might find that they would prefer the bird in the hand. It is well worth a shot, so don't be shy to bring it up with them before you do anything else. The second option, and a pretty clear one, end your tenancy. If you definitely want out, do take care. Most tenancies you can't just end them at will. So don't just move out and be done with it. You need to check your agreement, see how you can get out of it. If it's for a set period of time that's coming to an end, or if you have a break clause in your tenancy that says you can end it early if you want to, then it's relatively easy. Just read it carefully and do exactly what it says that you should do to end it. Usually that means giving some sort of written notice to your landlord, but do be careful when you're doing this, especially if you're relying on a break clause. It is very, very important to do exactly what the agreement says. So get your dates right, get the address to send it to right. Really small errors can render the whole thing void, which can mean that your landlord doesn't have to accept your notice, which in turn means your tenancy won't end when you want it to, and you are effectively still contractually on the hook to pay your rent. So well worth just taking a bit of time and being a bit careful if that's what you're doing. Third, a different alternative. You might be able to agree with your landlord that you'll give up the tenancy. This is sometimes called surrendering. It might be a bit tricky in the current climate. I would suggest if you can find a replacement tenant for your landlord, that is going to be absolutely a killer point for you. I suspect you'll find it a bit trickier than usual to surrender, given that the market is very uncertain at the moment otherwise. And finally, as another alternative again, and maybe something that is suitable if perhaps you do still need some premises but are thinking about downsizing, think about subletting maybe part of your business premises. So have a look at your tenancy agreement. But most of them will allow you to sublet part or all of your business premises as long as your landlord agrees to it. Depending on how your premises are actually physically laid out, it can be a great option to cut your rent bill effectively by sharing the space without too much disruption to your business. It's finding someone to sublet that's going to be the key, but some movement perhaps as more businesses are looking to downsize, you may find it's not too difficult to find someone to move in with you and share. So worth having a look, certainly, for that one. That's it. I think they're the kind of main options that are likely to be open to most businesses if they're thinking downsizing or changing their premises in the months to come.
Thanks, Helen. We've had another one through saying, following the recent closure of the UK's air bridge with Spain, what are an employer's obligations if staff are required to quarantine after returning from abroad? That's quite topical.
It is very topical, isn't it? So the current government guidance is for people returning to the UK to self-isolate or quarantine, as it's been called, for 14 days, unless they've returned from a country which is on one of the UK's travel corridor. If it's on the list for the UK's travel corridor. However, as we've recently seen with the quite abrupt closure of the air corridor with Spain, countries might be added to or removed from the list at any time. So staff who are on holiday abroad might get caught out by an unexpected period of quarantine when they get back from their nice sunny holiday. I think it's really important that employers do not ask staff to come into the workplace if they need to quarantine, and they should really just help them to comply with the requirement to self-isolate. These staff aren't eligible for statutory sick pay, unless of course they're unwell, in which case they might be, which means that employers will need to come up with another arrangement with their staff, unless of course they're willing to pay sick pay regardless to them. So if working from home is possible, that's probably going to be the best practical solution. Otherwise, if working from home is not possible, furlough leave might be an option if that particular staff member's agreed to be furloughed previously. Or they may be able to agree that the quarantine period will count as an additional period of annual leave if the staff member's got enough holiday days left, or even unpaid leave if that's the only other option. So I think there's a few different things employers could think about to agree with their staff.
Awesome, thanks, Frankie. So I think I'd like to thank everyone for all the questions they've sent in. I think that concludes the Q&A section. We'll work hard to answer any questions we didn't manage to ask and answer in the session. And I'd like to hand back to Chloe from GBEA.
Helen, Frankie and Guy, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have any final words before we sign off?
After you guys.
Thanks very much, Chloe. I think it's been a really interesting one, and really nice to see some of the questions coming in as well from people. There's quite a few things I think for us to have a look at after this.
Yeah, likewise, been a really good session, and really interesting to see the kind of things that customers want to know and businesses are concerned about. So thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone. I have included Helen, Frankie and Guy's LinkedIn profiles along with Sparqa Legal and Starling Bank's LinkedIn profiles in the comments section as well. So if you would like to connect with any of the speakers, they are there for you to do so. Our next webinar in the Lockdown Learning for Business series takes place on Wednesday, the 5th of August at 2 p.m. Protect your business, staying cyber secure as the UK reopens with Cyber Smart and Starling Bank. If there is anything you'd like to catch up on from today's session, we'll be sending out the replay of the webinar coming at 5 p.m. today. You can find a replay and future webinars at www.freshbusinessthinking.haysummit.com or by clicking on the link in the comments. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you again, Helen, Frankie and Guy.